The common question, do you only work on turbine aircraft? No, we don't. We have the Hangar 9 Bronco. Obviously this doesn't look like the normal Bronco because if you follow the channel, you know this has been stripped down, repainted, weathered, stenciled, riveted, panel lined, and it is ready to put together. Thanks guys for tuning into the Bronco build. Let's get started. So this aircraft came to us, I think a couple months ago. It's something like that. I can't remember, maybe a few months ago, maybe more. Anyways, this aircraft was stripped down. It was fiberglassed, primed, painted, so much work done to this aircraft. Over 30,000 rivets installed. It's an absolute masterpiece now. So the scheme on this aircraft, the owner used to fly this aircraft, and that's what this one is modeled after. So if you're wondering about the scheme and the color and everything, or the nomenclature and stuff, that's where it comes from. So we've been kind of working on this thing for a while. We're still waiting on the cockpit to come back from RC Custom 3D printing, and that's still in the works, but we do have a lot of the equipment here. So as per usual, first thing we're going to do is we are going to take a look at all of the equipment that's going in this aircraft. Now some of it will be missing, like we've got warbird pilots that are going in this aircraft. They're missing right now because they are with Joe at RC Custom 3D printing, getting detailed and such. So there's a few things missing, but we've got a lot of it here. All right, overview shot here of all the equipment that's going in the aircraft. So let's take a look at this stuff. And of course, we are piloting, setting this aircraft up with a Jetty radio system. So the owner also has a DS24. So we'll be setting it up on my shop DS24. I will be using the specified motors. So these are the 180 E-Flight brushless Outrunner motors. I think this is going to be a wicked setup for this aircraft. And paired with those motors are some Falcon propellers. So pop these guys open. They've got some covers already installed on them, and these are pretty awesome. So the 20 to 21 inch ones, and very nice props, very nice. So nice and thin, I love it, looks good. So those are wicked. For the speed control function, the Meson from Jetty, the Evo electronic speed controllers. This pairs so well with the Jetty system, of course, because of the telemetry feedback and everything. So looking forward to setting this aircraft up with these units. Battery-wise, these are the batteries that are going to be powering each of the motors. So we've got an 8,000 milliamp 12S battery pack, an absolute monster of a pack. So those are cool. The owner supplied these things. We also have the other side of the connectors as well. With our Jetty system, we're installing two Rex 7s with 40 centimeter dipole antennas. I had to supply an R3 here for the on-off function. So that'll be turning the radio system on and off. We've got an R900 as well. That'll be added to the system. So those are the receiver and on-off functions are handled by those things. We're using a Jetty Central Box, the 200 series. So that's there. And of course, Cortex Pro, because this pairs so well with the Jetty system. Another addition here, we've got the random motion generator from RC Geek. This can be ordered when you order your pilots from Warbird Pilots as well, so we'll be installing that in the aircraft. For all of our control surfaces, those are all going to be MKS HV1220 servos. Great servo, not overly expensive either, but good quality servos. We've got 10 of those guys. I don't have them up on the table, but I planned on putting MKS HV69s for the doors. So hopefully that works out. We'll see how things work out with those. Spinners, we've got these Extreme Flight carbon red spinners. Awesome looking units. So we've got two of those, of course, as well. And one of the last things that we ordered here was the full Unilight system for this aircraft. So we've got the 1/5 scale Pro version, and this is all the stuff that comes with it. So, but we won't pull all this stuff out, but there's the whole kit and caboodle for the entire setup. So looking forward to seeing this kit on this aircraft. So when the aircraft came back from paint, everything was wrapped up. So all of this stuff is, a lot of it's surfaces, individual little pieces. So we've got all that stuff wrapped up. Here's the stock pilot, but of course we're not using that because it comes with the, we're using 2 of the Warbird pilots. And we've got the landing gear as well too, which has been painted and weathered as well. So that is the stock landing gear setup for the aircraft that's sitting there. So it's a good thing we made some room in the shop because we're using a lot of it right now. We've got the fuselage pieces way over there. We've got the wing right here. We've got some pieces right here. We've got a lot of our parts right here. We've got more parts right here. And the shop's pretty empty right now, but this thing takes up a lot of room. So we're going to be following the manual during this assembly process. So that's one of the first things we need to do is pull out that manual and see what we need to start on. I suspect we're going to be starting off with hinging. All right, so one of the things I want to share is, where do I start on a project like this? So the first thing I've done is I've taken a gander through the manual and just kind of got an overview of what the first steps in the manual are. So the first steps are surface hinging. So there's lots of surfaces on these wings. We've got ailerons for flaps. We've got elevators to do. We've got rudders to do on those surfaces. There's lots of hinging to get done and servo mounting. So that's the first thing to do in the manual. But before we do any of that, we have to do all of the normal things we do to begin a project like this. So we've got to set up a new model. We've got to update all of our jetty items. We've got to burn in all of our servos. And those are kind of the first big things to do before we do any of those other steps. So number 1, I'm going to get everything upgraded. Number 2, I'm going to set up a new model. And number 3, I'm going to get our servos starting in the burn-in process. So the reason we do the burn-in process with our servos is, I explain this in every video series, or try to, we put the servos through 990 cycles with our jetty box. And what that does is, it basically, if a servo is going to fail, we want it to fail during that burn-in process. So generally with electronic items, if they're going to fail, it's usually in the beginning part of their life. And it doesn't happen very often, but that's when we want the failures to show up. So only takes about 20 minutes per servo, and we do it on every servo we install in an aircraft. All right, so we're just working our way through our servos here. As I get these servos completed, I always put a check mark on them, whether it's paint marker or Sharpie, then I know which ones are done. And working through a few things here. So number 1, this plane has a lot of surfaces, obviously. So what I'm doing here is I'm just writing everything out so I have an idea of our central box and how we're going to get our ports arranged. So with all of our surfaces, our nose, our gear, our throttle, our lights channel, that equals 14. Our gyro doesn't really need a physical channel, but it needs to have a channel assigned or a function assigned, so that's 15. And then what we'll also do is we're going to have each of our gear doors assigned to a port as well. Now that gear door, we don't need a separate function for each door. We need one door function, and then we will have 6 outputs. So on the aircraft, there is 2 gear doors on the nose and 2 gear doors on each of the nacelles, meaning we're going to have 6 servos operating the gear doors. So this is a great opportunity to use something like the SE6 expander with the 6-inch harness cable, and this is a wicked way to set up an additional 5 or 6 channels using this device. So what we can do is, this plugs into our central box, and we can put it in, let's say, port 15 as an example. This operates this device, or plugs into this device, and each of these ports is programmable for a function. Hopefully I'm explaining that well. Anyways, so all of our doors can run off this one device. Now there are other methods to do this, like if we were using our REX receivers, these ports are available. The downside is the voltage coming out of the R1 and R2 is a little bit lower, so you wouldn't want to plug a bunch of things into this device, versus the SE6 cable uses an MR30 end, and it's just a way better way to power multiple low draw servos in a scenario like this. Now we could use a larger central box, but there's really, on an aircraft like this, there is no need for like a 300 series central box. It's just way overkill for something like this aircraft. So using that SE6 is what I planned on from the very beginning, and it's just a great way to do this. Now we could also use a sequencer like the Chikoi gear sequencer. The downside is it only has 5 outputs, I believe, on it, and we need 6. So that SE6 works great, and we'll be able to do our sequencing through the radio system. All right, so we've gone ahead and made sure all of our devices were up to date, so that's done, and I've gone in and made a new model. Now this model, what we do is we always copy our default model. So we've got a blank model here, which has lots of the initial stuff set up. So I just copied the blank model, and we copied that and made it Bronco. So what I've also done is gone in and added all of our functions in. So some of the normal stuff in there is all done. Then we've got lights, doors as well too. Now initially I just put the doors on the gear switch. So we will turn that into a logical switch later on, but for setup purposes we'll use the gear switch for now. And then we went in and assigned all of our servos. Now, the basic theory behind all of this is you want to make sure your gyro-controlled servos obviously are your first 16 channels, but we don't have that many, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I went in aileron, aileron, elevator, there's only one, rudder, rudder, nose wheel. Those are our gyro-controlled surfaces. Then we've got our 4 flaps, each having their own channel output, which is very handy. We've got gear, throttle 1, 2, lights, gyro sense, which is channel 15. Now the reason I put gyro sense as channel 15 is we don't need a physical output port on anything. And then doors, the reason doors is 16 is because, again, we don't need a physical output port here, because what's going to happen is our SE6, that's going to be assigned for each of those 6 channels for 16, and they're each adjustable through the SE6. We'll get more into that as we get there, but that's our basic channel layout for this aircraft. And I think that covers everything. I don't think I missed anything, so that's our perfect starting point. All right, so first surface we're going to hinge is our horizontal stab or elevator surface. So the manual does a really good job of explaining how to do this. The first thing you want to do is, what I like to do is check the fit of the pins. So the pins in this case are tight into the horizontal stab portion, and they're loose into the elevator surface portion. So what that means to me is we're going to get them installed in the horizontal stab first. And the reason for that is that allows us to get it set and get our pins kind of set in at the right depth. Now if we try and put this into our elevator surface first, those pins can go too far in, and the actual pivot point is buried inside the elevator surface. So what we're going to do is get them glued into here first, and then install the elevator onto the horizontal stab. So what we're going to do as a first step, and this is again covered in the manual very well, so we're going to repeat this process pretty much for all the other surfaces exactly the same. Just take a drop of light lubricant and put it on the hinge points. This just keeps any of our epoxy from gumming up or messing up the pivot point. So we'll work those in as well. Now, the manual mentions 2 different types of adhesive to use in this scenario. So you can use regular epoxy. The problem with like 30-minute epoxy is it runs, or doesn't stay put. And that's where an aero epoxy like Hysol, they talk about other products in the manual, are really good and beneficial for scenarios like this because the aero epoxies stay where you put them. So that's what we're going to be using to do all of our surface hinging on this aircraft. Now, one of our most commonly used products is Loctite Hysol 9462. That's kind of the staple in the model aircraft industry. But I do also use West Systems, it's being covered here, but the 610 material, and it's SIX10. This is nice because it's a huge tube, and you get a lot out of this, this tube as well. Same type of thing, it stays put. It's kind of like Vaseline when you get it all mixed up, so both of those work great. So in this case, we're going to get a little bit of Hysol mixed up and get it installed in our horizontal stab surface. Now, if I was doing all of the hinging at one time, I could use an extension nozzle, but in this case, we'll just use trusty bent screwdriver here and get some adhesive installed in the holes on the pins for both sides. All right, so horizontal stab is hinged, and we've also got our horn installed. The horn, again, this is explained in the manual very well. You just sand the horn out, stuffed a whole bunch of aero epoxy in there, installed it. I like to have the bolt going through there just to make sure everything is lined up 100%. And generally, you would put some tape across the surfaces to keep them in place and keep them tight. In this case, these fit together so well on this surface that we don't need to put any tape on there. And I also don't want to run the risk of pulling any of our new finish off or anything like that. So, so I've just got that propped up. It's tucked in right tight to the horizontal stab, between the surface and the horizontal stab. And it is very nice. So we've got a piece of tape or a roll of tape underneath the back there, and we'll just leave that be and let it cure. All right, so we got our servo mounted here and just used our standard servo screws. What I'll do in this case now is, this is all balsa wood, so I'm going to take some thin CA and soak all of this wood in thin CA, and that's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to strengthen it. It's also going to lock in our screws as well. So you don't have to go super crazy, but you can see as soon as you put the thin CA on there, it just gets soaked up by that balsa wood, which is perfect. All right, so I did the hinging on this about 12 hours ago, early morning, and we are all good now. So what happens is you get a little bit of the aero epoxy or Hysol on the hinges. So when I first bent this, it kind of just went pop, and now she's all good. Get full deflection on it, so that is great. Okay, so it looks like Hangar 9 has run leads or strings for our servo leads, which is awesome. So that's going to come out to this location right there. And what we need to do first, though, is get our light figured out. So I did a little bit of research this morning and was kind of playing around with the light locations. So one of our red strobes goes right on the tail here. It's kind of right beside this guy right here. So I'm going to take a tape measure, measure the center mark on this. I'm hoping it comes in right beside that. It's probably right in line with this guy, so it's going to be right beside there. And that is going to be very close to the servo opening as well too. So there's a chance we're probably going to put it right in that forward section. So it's right in front of the servo opening, so maybe in this area. And this is the light that is going in that spot. So this is the red strobe light, and this is what it looks like right there. So I'll show you guys how we get this fit on the stab. All right, so what we're going to do is measure this width of this horizontal stab. So we'll do it in millimeters so we're accurate. So that's 995 millimeters. Yeah, 995 millimeters. So half of that is going to be 497.5. So we'll just call it 497.5. So our halfway mark is right about there. As long as we're in the wheelhouse, that is good. So right about there. And then what we'll do is we are going to get this marked out. Now I want to skew this a little bit towards the front, towards this joint right there. So we're going to go right about there. We'll measure it one more time before we mark it. So I'm going to be 497.5, so about there. And what we'll do now, first thing I'm going to do is sharpen my pencil, because what I'm looking to do here is a very thin outline of this lens. And the reason we do that is so then we have an idea of our working area. So as long as we make all of our cuts shorter than those lenses, or this lens, or narrower, or whatever you want to call it, just like that. Confirm we're happy with that. So, and the other thing is our servo leads are going to come out of this side. That's where the string is run to. So what I'll do in this case is we're going to get this mounted in there. Our lead is going to come to this location here, and then we'll cut this off, and this will be part of our wire connector, our ash lock connector. This piece will keep, because we want to keep this end to use as a plug-in to go into the lighting controller. So I'll keep this entire section of wire. Now the way to do this lens in this whole system, what I'll usually do is, we'll see how much this comes on there. So yeah, what I would normally do is maybe cut the heat shrink if we need to, but I don't think we need to. So really all we're going to do is we're just going to Dremel this out, and we're going to leave about 3 millimeters around that pencil mark, and that's going to give us a gluing surface for our lens to mount to. But we basically want to have a little channel that this thing fits into, and then this fits over top. So really what we're looking to do is get this heat shrink in there by having a slot for it to mount into. So I'm going to pull my Dremel out. We'll do a little bit of manipulation here, and I'll show you guys what we end up with. All right, and here we go. We got it all set up. So the wire's been cut. I installed it, and essentially we just did a channel there. I did cut a little bit of the heat shrink off just to make it easier to pop in and out. So what I'll do is I'm going to put some shoe goop on the base of this guy, and we're going to get that stuck and glued in place, and that'll help hold the clear lens on the light into the actual horizontal stab here. Then this wire is going to be run with our servo wire coming to our end of the horizontal stab. All right, so light's installed. We've got that taped down with some green masking tape. Next thing we're doing is running our servo lead from the servo pocket to that section right there. So we have to get our servo extension done up. We're using Powerbox Maxi wire for this aircraft, Powerbox ends. So we'll do up a female end on this side to plug the servo into, and then we'll have a reasonable amount coming out of the end where we can put our ash lock connector on this side. All right, so we got our servo lead done up, our extension, and now it's time to plug in our servo and get the arm installed and centered. We have to sand this arm down first. Basically, the correct mounting location as per the manual is this first hole. So we're going to sand this down on our belt sander and basically get rid of that much of the carbon. And then what we'll do before we put our extension on is we'll get this plugged into our central box. That's going to center out the elevator servo, and then we will, once we get the servo arm installed, we'll be able to install our servo lead. All right, so our elevator servo is all done. We've got our servo arm attached. We've got our servo lead bundled up. We've got our extension installed, heat shrink installed at that connector. Now, I will always bundle our servo leads at the servo. Reason you want to do that is you don't want to use this to go through the surface, because then if you ever have to change the servo and you've got this run all the way to the end at a connector, it's going to be very difficult to get at that connection point. So you want to be able to access this connector at the servo opening. All right, so we've got our ash lock connector done on our horizontal stab. Now the reason I love using these ash lock connectors is now we can just take our servo lead from our jetty box or our central box, plug it into here, paying attention to polarity, of course. And now we can get our servo powered on, centered, and do up our arm. Now, one important note, the manual calls for this arm to be much longer than it's actually needing. So if you look at this setup here, if we lay out our ball joints, this rod that they've included is way too long. And they call for like 2 inches, 2 7/8 or something like that. I haven't even looked at the manual. So the other thing is the threads on this threaded rod are not very aggressive. So I'm going to ditch this thing and we're just going to switch that out for a piece of 440 rod or whatever fits in those ball joints best, maybe 3 mil. But yeah, I think that's worthy of swapping, and we need just a straight piece anyways, because that's going to be such a short little linkage. All right, so we've got our elevator servo hooked up, our linkage is hooked up. There's no real centering reference here, so what I do is just hold it on its edge and physically look down the actual surface and get that centered as possible. You can see here how we have our servo lead plugged into our ash lock connector. So that's going into our central box. So we've got full control over that aileron servo. And what I've done here is I've just taken my ruler and just checked. So having the ruler like this and high rates on this thing is 40 millimeters of travel. Low rates is like 20, 30 mils of travel. So if we can get 40 mils, that's good. And with this whole setup here and everything going on with that servo arm, we get 40 mils of travel, and we start to get close to the edge of the opening here. So that setup's going to be good. I don't think you're going to be really flying at 40 mils very often, but I don't know. But we've got that ability, so that's 40 mils up and down. The other thing I'm checking when I'm doing this is, so right now when I go up elevator, the servo's traveling backwards. So we're going to go in, and these are all the little changes to make at this point. And when you actually get the plane fully assembled and everything's plugged into the central box, there's really no surprises if you're doing all of the setup or as much as you can at these first stages. So I like to get the travel set up, the limit set up, so we're not over traveling anything, and of course getting the direction set up as well. So all we're going to do in this case is we're going to go in to the servo itself. Servo setup, we're number 3, and we're just going to reverse the servo. So now up elevator is going the correct direction, down elevator is going the correct direction. And I want to reduce our travel here so we're not bottoming out. So I'm going to do that in our menu. I'm going to do that in servo travel, and then we've got the dual rates all set up on our flight modes, so that'll also be a thing, but I'll just drop this down to 70 in both directions. And there we go. So now when we're bottoming out, we're just hitting the end of that opening right there. So now we don't have to worry about the servo over traveling in the future. All right, aileron hinging. This side's done already. That's our left wing, and this is our right. So I've got my pins installed with epoxy into the wing portion. Then what I do is have them sticking out, put a nice thin coat all the way around the pins, get them lined up, and now I'm going to take the actual surface, get some epoxy installed in the holes, and then we will just slip that over top of the pins. All right, and some hours later, the hinging is all cured on our ailerons, so those are done on both sides, and we've confirmed we get lots of, well, full travel basically. It bottoms out on the joint there. So next thing I think in the manual is the servos for the aileron. Now we also have to think about our lighting on the wing tips as well too. So fairly simple on this one. We're basically going to figure out where they're going to go, probably right in this location right there. And we're just going to measure forward, mark that, mark the other side, and we'll get our wingtip lights mounted. Now, the tip lights have 3 wires, and the reason they have 3 wires is you've got one for power and one for signal for the white portion. So these lights are green and white, so you'll have, let's say, white on the front side, green on the back side, whatever it is. Anyways, this is those go on the wingtips. And just looking at the wiring setup here. So Hangar 9 puts this nice plastic tube in there. So if you're using regular servo connectors coming to the base here, that's going to work out really well because you've got 2 servo connectors. So easy, they can fit inside the tube, fit inside that tube. The center section has a tube as well. But because we've got 3, 6, 9 wires, we're going to use an ash lock connector, and we're going to go right in this opening right here. Reason for that is the ash lock connector is bigger, so we're going to have a 9-pin ash lock connector, and that's just going to tuck in right in here to the wing. And our other side of the center section looks just like this. So there'll be a connector here, and then we'll also have probably 2 connectors joining our entire wing system into the fuselage. So just systematically thinking about all this stuff as we work through it. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is get the lights mounted on the wingtips. I want to get that done, get the wire run first before we start closing up this area with our aileron servos. All right, so we got our left wing set up here. Now I did have to cut some of the heat shrink off. I know that's not a great idea, but the downside is there's a piece of structure that goes in this area right here, and we don't want to cut too much into that structure. So it was a bit of a compromise. So I cut off about maybe 3/4 of an inch, the fins that are extended off here. So obviously we kept some of the heat shrink still. So this is ready to go in. So what I do in this case is this lens is just kind of friction fit on there, but I'll put shoe goop all the way around this base on the light and the reflector or the lens, and on both sides all the way around. We'll tuck this guy in, and that kind of locks everything in place. But if you ever need to remove this to replace it for any reason, this will come off. The reflector also, or the lens, is also going to come off as well too. Before I started grinding into this wing, I did outline the lens on there as well, so we've got a nice position where we know we're lining that up too. And just a reminder, guys, the freest thing you can do to support the channel is hit that like button, the thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to the channel if you're not a channel subscriber. When I look at our metrics in YouTube, a huge majority of the people that watch my content do not subscribe to the channel. It's free. Hit that subscribe button down below. You also get to see more of Nez too. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up video number 1 in the series of the Hangar 9 Ov-10 Bronco aircraft. Fun project so far. It's quite straightforward. This is one of those projects that if you follow the manual, you're going to get a plane that flies really well. Obviously ours is a little bit more advanced with the addition of the new finishing and the lights and everything, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's still just a Hangar 9 Bronco aircraft, and that's how it's going together. There's nothing different from if you bought one as well. Also encourage you guys to check out our website, thelightersideofrc.com. We do have a new for sale section up there, and that's going to be somewhere where we may have aircraft that are here at the shop that are for sale. There is going to be aircraft that might be located in different parts of the world that are for sale, and that is not something that the average person or anybody can just put an aircraft that's for sale on the website. It's got to come through us. It's going to be listed on there, pictures, and I guess you could say vetted by us. So there's currently, at the time of videoing this, there's an F-18 on there. We do have a PC-21 we're going to be adding as well, possibly a Skymaster F-16. So keep an eye out on the website for those to come. And we also have afterjet power. I did place an order with FCT fuel bags and UATs. So Salim is going to be shipping that order out to us, and we'll be adding FCT products onto our website. So looking forward to that as well too. So that's another reason to keep an eye out on our website. Thanks guys so much for watching. Sorry I'm distracted because Nez is crawling around in the Bronco. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to list them down below, and keep an eye out for video number 2 where we continue with the Bronco from Hangar 9 aircraft.
We hope you enjoyed the video, so like
and subscribe.
See you in the next one.